Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Aftermath series. Let us waste no time at all and dive right into this week's episode of Critical Role. And today's episode is going to be less of breaking down what happened in the episode and more of talking about my experience at the live show, since I did in fact attend, and oh my god, it was absolutely incredible. Such a surreal experience being in a room with so many other critters who are passionate about the show. Because honestly, when we watch on Twitch or on YouTube or whatever, we're pretty isolated. We usually, at least for me, I watch by myself. I don't have any immediate friends that I watch the show with, so it's a very isolated viewing experience. But then having the chance to be in a room with 3,000 other critters who have such a passion and love for the show, listening to them cheer and laugh, and it's just an absolutely insane experience that I hope you all will be able to experience at some point, because wow, it just made me fall in love with the show even more, and I didn't even think that was possible. And the crowd for this show was seriously amazing. But I do also feel so terribly bad for the people who had to go through the issues that were happening with the tickets. But then finally, the show did begin, and of course the cheers from the crowd as the cast made their way on stage was insane. And of course the experience became even more surreal when the entire crowd sang "Your Turn to Roll," the Critical Role theme song. And for me, that was one of the main moments that I was waiting for going to this live show. But now, with all of that intro stuff being said, we can discuss a little bit about what happened in the episode. Now, of course, I did not take notes during this episode as I wanted to be fully immersed in the experience. So, I don't remember too much of what happened. I remember the important parts, but sort of the smaller details, I'll have to rewatch the live show once more to get a full story experience of what happened. But here we go. Let's see if I can remember most of what happened. So the party arrives in Nicodranus and they have a little bit of downtime. They do notice that there is a heavy Dwendalian presence within the docks of Nicodranus as they are getting ready, gathering supplies, preparing for the negotiations that will be taking place. The party also took note of a Cerberus assembly ship that was also on the docks. And so after a bit of perusing and shopping, the party made their way to this Cerberus assembly ship, where they hoped to have an audience with Ludinus, who was indeed on board, and the guards let the Mighty Nine have this meeting. Along with Ludinus Deleth, there was also one other Archmage of the Cerberus Assembly, whose name is escaping me, but he is essentially in charge of diplomacy. He's like the diplomatic figurehead for the Cerberus Assembly. And then the other figure with them was a Lord of Nicodranus, who immediately became nervous and anxious as the Mighty Nine approached. Definitely something that sounded the alarms for Caduceus, at least. But in this conversation, they were essentially just talking about what to expect with the negotiations, and the diplomatic fellow invited the Mighty Nine to a party tomorrow evening at the Marquis, the sort of mayor, if you will, of Nicodranus. The party accepted this invitation, and the anxious lord quickly made his leave from this conversation, seemingly quite nervous and anxious because of the Mighty Nine. A few members took note of this, and as the Mighty Nine left this ship, Caleb sent Frumpkin to investigate this figure as he and Ludinus made their way below deck. Frumpkin was able to stealthily enter the ship and peer inside to listen in on this conversation that Ludinus and this lord were having. And after Ludinus cast a quick dispel magic in his proximity, an illusion was broken that this lord had. It was revealed that this lord was in fact Essek, which means that Essek was in on this whole conspiracy, this whole war this entire time, essentially betraying the trust of the Mighty Nine. But there is definitely some conflicting emotions within Essek, as Essek and Ludinus were discussing the Mighty Nine and the good negotiations that are coming up. But eventually their conversation came to an end, and the party went on their way, gathering the necessary supplies to perform the spell or ritual on Not the Brave to return her back into her halfling form. And since the Mighty Nine is going to be attending a party, Jester and Caduceus took it upon themselves to purchase rather fancy and expensive outfits for the party. Eventually, evening came, and the party made their way to the lavish chateau and into the bathroom where they were going to perform this ritual in a bathtub with all the clay, which Marion was a bit skeptical at first, but allowed the party to conduct such a ritual. And after a very heartwarming, heart-wrenching moment where Not said something very genuine and loving to each member of the party, and saying, "I love you" to Caleb, and Caleb saying, "I love you" back. Just such an adorable moment that I'm so glad I got to experience live, as the crowd was just so full of love, and you could just feel the tears coming. But the ritual commenced, and once it finished, there was just so much good anxiety. There was so much anticipation for what was to come, since we knew what was happening. We knew it was going to work this time. At least, I was pretty sure it was going to work this time, since the curse was broken. But then, as Matthew Mercer described, Veth's body falling back to the ground, and then saying that lying before them was Veth Bernardo, immediately the entire crowd erupted. And I watched that moment again when I got home on the live stream, and the audio that the cameras picked up did not at all do the crowd justice. The crowd absolutely erupted in applause and cheers, and it was deafening. And honestly, such an amazing moment that, again, I'm so thankful that I was able to share with so many amazing critters. But then the night continued. Veth was reunited with Yeza and Luke, and they had a lovely evening, to say the least. And eventually, the next day came, the outfits for the party arrived, and woo! There were some fancy outfits that Jester and Caduceus picked out for the party. But eventually, the party made their way to the party that evening, and, well, the party kind of had a plan of what to do with Essek, who is guised as this Lord of Nicodranus, but everything sort of went to the wayside as Veth decided to poison Essek's drink with a paralyzing potion. As Essek became paralyzed, Jester sort of ushered him outside of the party to avoid any eyes, and then Veth, Caduceus, Yasha, and Caleb followed Jester outside, where Essek tried to get away, but Caleb slapped down some manacles on him, and Caduceus commanded him, used the spell command, to tell him to stop trying to run away, and then they were able to take Essek back to the Ball Eater, where they were reunited again with Ford and Bo, who decided to stay behind a little bit, and they had a little bit of an interaction with another disguised person who is a seemingly Dwendalian noble who is actually just a black-scaled dragonborn, but they weren't able to get too much information on that, and Bo was high out of her mind after Caduceus had cast some spells on them. But eventually, Ford and Bo returned to the Ball Eater, where they all collectively had a deep and heartbreaking conversation with Essek, as he revealed to have a hand, and pretty much one of the main reasons there is a war between the Dwendalian Empire and the Kryn Dynasty to begin with. He explained that his ambitions pretty much became the better of him, and that he's a selfish, irredeemable person. And I've said this before, and many of you have as well, Caleb and Essek are very similar, and in this moment in particular, Caleb really sees that connection that they share. They are really not that different at all. But Essek continued saying that his research into this dunamis and these beacons only got him so far, and he needed to learn more, and so he stole these artifacts, these beacons, and gave them to the Empire so they could conduct their own research, and then they could compare notes in a way and maybe further their knowledge of dunamis. And obviously the Korean dynasty found out that these beacons were stolen, but assumed that it was the Empire themselves that stole them. And so the war began. And Essek didn't plan on the Mighty Nine being such prominent figures in this, and he certainly didn't plan on developing feelings for the Mighty Nine. And this is where his conflicting emotions come into play. He's confused because he truly wants to accomplish the things that he said. He really wants to fully expand his knowledge of dunamis, but at what cost? He doesn't want the Mighty Nine to die because of his mistakes. And the Mighty Nine, Caleb in particular, are desperately trying to make him see that he can still make right. And Essek even said that both sides do want an end to this war. The dynasty, the empire, the Cerberus Assembly, they are willing to put an end to this conflict. Because Essek did say that the Empire does still have a second beacon that they are not giving up, but they are still returning one of the beacons that originally did belong to the dynasty, as the beacon that the Empire is keeping was one that they discovered themselves in Pride's Call. And so this negotiations is the Cerberus Assembly's and Essek's way of ending this conflict while still continuing their research into these beacons. So while yes, Essek and the Assembly are responsible for thousands upon thousands of deaths, and it's terrible, and Essek definitely sees the errors of his ways, but the party still wants Essek to forgive himself. They still want him to understand that they themselves have all made mistakes. Yasha, albeit she was mind-controlled, but she massacred many people. Caleb killed his own family, but they are still on the path to redemption, and they still support and care for each other, and that is what Caleb was trying to make Essek understand, and not even told Essek that what he's going through, the things he's doing, the rest of the party has gone through those same things, and it's what's brought them together, it's what's made them a family. And then not said to Essek, welcome to the Mighty Nine, since it really feels like he could be a member of this family. And on that incredible one-liner, Matt ended the episode. An absolutely insane and awesome episode with so many amazing, hilarious, powerful, story-changing moments that I will cherish this experience for the rest of my life. It was absolutely incredible. But with all of that being said, we are going to wrap up. Let me know all of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions during that episode. And I know for a fact I missed so many amazing moments that I didn't bring up. But be sure to check out the What the Sheep podcast tonight at 7 p.m. PST, where I will be fully discussing this episode with a few other critters. So be sure to tune into that for a deeper breakdown and discussion of this episode. As always, I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful rest of your weekend, and I will see you all next week.